So if there's 10 minutes set aside to see if anyone would like to make any comments or thoughts.
Well, I'm very pleased that the Parish Council formed a committee on Chearsley climate neutral 2050.
Carbon neutral.
Carbon neutral, that's what I mean. I knew I'd get one of the words wrong. But, you know what I mean. So there's something that, you know, one is now I witnessed one committee meeting, others are getting on board, coming up with plans and recommendations. And one of the things that I was trying some while ago to get a shift in emphasis was on the best kept village competition. And I could have endorsed, you know, well-maintained allotments, the carbon, you know, the energy performance status of housing, the charge points, numbers of EV vehicles and electric bikes, and possible cycle paths, and any other ideas really. So, oh yes, and another idea I had was the amount of money spent in the pub, the shop, you know, supporting local business somehow, because the shopkeepers say be prepared to, you know, reveal the percentages takings that were from what he considered villagers and passing traffic. And so, but, you know, it would be good to have that functioning as local shopping, if you like. So those are the items I have then. Whether they will be relevant for future consideration is up to you.
Well, I'm sort of fairly remote personally. Oh, no, actually, I'm not fairly remote. I'm incredibly involved, but at a different level in Bucks Council. I think I've written to you. And I've written to you a couple of times, and we've spoken outside the shop, and said that personally, and I know Keith, you're much more involved in this locally than I am. I'm happy to get involved where I can, but for me, it's really important wearing my other hat that we try and tie in when we can with some of the initiatives that are going on currently with the cabinet member for climate change and all the other things that are going on. And I'm working quite closely with Greg Smith.
Yes, who's the cabinet member for climate change?
Is well, no. I tell you that I just forgot his name, but I said to him before. I've spoken to him recently about the initiatives that are going on, and he's really pleased, really happy. And any local awareness and any local things that can go on is brilliant. Yes. But I think it's important we try and tap into those people as well, because people like Gregory Smith, the Green Party member, we're actually working with him as well quite closely, whether we're Conservatives, Communists or anything else, on trying to approach, particularly from my aspect, planning, because you know we're dealing with the Red Rose and goodness knows what at the moment about some developments in Haddon. Yes. Talking to them about whether we can change gas boilers now for heat source pumps, we can put grey scale recovery systems in to flush the baths into the loo and everything else. So I am very committed to understanding, and a lot of my time is about understanding and learning. But I don't know, Keith, if you'd like to say something, you're closer to this.
Sure, I was going to give a formal update. It's a standing agenda, I put it on as a standing agenda item going forward. So, you know, try and give an update. And obviously you see what's going on because you're on the circulation list of the Chearsley group. Yes. So what we're trying to do is it's a grassroots movement. You know, small steps, one at a time, increase awareness, And we need to, you know, it can't be just the parish council and then 600
No, I
other
think
people.
the idea of a questionnaire is a very good one.
So I'll give there's a formal agenda update, and I'm happy to give it then.
Well, you know, see here and hear what you've got to say on it.
Absolutely. But yeah, I think increasing awareness, having an event in the village, I've got a formal ask of the parish council to support a note that we crafted together, you know, in the carbon neutral group, which you've seen.
Yeah.
So I want to put that out. I set up a Facebook group, carbon neutral, Chearsley carbon neutral group, etc., etc. So I'll try and cover briefly those items when we get to it. But small steps, and it's increasing awareness, and also trying to get other people who are interested involved.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. And as I say, it's not that we're not interested. There's an awful lot going on at the moment. I know you're a great activist in this area, which is wonderful, and I support that wholly. But it's a bit like the best kept village. If I was being frank, it's something that we're not focusing on right at this moment in time, because there's so many other issues that we prioritise. It hasn't gone away, Michael. It's just that there are so many things you can deal with, and I can't end up dealing with 10 things and diluting everyone's efforts when I should be concentrating on 1 or 2 and getting those ticked off, and then we can move on to 3 and 4 sort of thing.
But hopefully
But
hopefully the working group will take the mantle on rather than everything going through the PC and Nick, etc.
that's good.
But you're right to kind of just bang the drum and remind us.
Yeah, well, you don't know the Prime Minister was banging the drum today, so.
Yeah, no, I listened to that closely. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Michael. Brilliant. Any other comments?
Well, I was just going to pick up on Mike's first one, the best kept village. It didn't happen last year.
No, I didn't.
We haven't heard anything about next year, I suppose. Because I know, I remember, Michael, we met with Bill Chapel.
Yes, exactly.
He sort of indicated then that it was very much, you had volunteer judges who visited villages,
I know.
and it was a matter of absolutely that.
It's
So I just wonder whether there's been any.
Well, I know Bill well now. Why don't I take it away, and I'll ask him tomorrow what's happening with Best Kept Village, and I'll come back to you. Yeah. So actually for me tomorrow to find that out. That's fine. Okay. Any other thoughts or comments for now? Oh, we have time just to turn this off, so that's fine. Okay, that's about the 10 minutes, so we'll move on. Apologies for absence.
So Ian Houseman, Julia Witcher, John Lewis and Tim Bradley.
Yeah, okay.
Those 50% legal.
50% is the best. At least the 50% seems to be working. Usual number 2, declarations of interest. Declaring any personal prejudice or pecuniary interests in the agenda. Does anyone have anything to? Okay. Approval of the minutes, Monday the 19th of July. If I could have something to propose.
Fine.
Yeah, thank you.
Seconded.
Seconded with Keith. 4 pages, Helen. Very good. Any matters arising, Helen, from the previous minutes?
A lot of these are quite old now because the meeting was in July, but the first one was around updating the playground, key to discuss with the village hall committee. I feel like that's on the agenda, isn't it?
It sort of is, but I can
Yeah.
probably get to it if you like now and done with it. But Keith, I'm not sure. I think we had a conversation, but I certainly had one with Antonia. Anne Adams very kindly agreed to take up the mantle of the playgrounds in terms of the equipment. And has already had 1 quote back, awaiting a 2nd quote, also seeing a 3rd organisation. She updated me today by email. I've sort of talked through with her firstly what I think should be there, but I'm not a kid anymore most of the time. So Anne had some really good ideas to her school background and talking to some school teachers and headmistresses she knew. And then what we said was when we got that back and we got an idea of cost, we come to the village hall to Antonia and to a couple of mums and say, what do you think?
Great.
The danger of getting like 5 or 6 people initially was we end up sort of designing a racehorse by consensus and end up with a 3-legged donkey. So I thought if we kept the numbers small to start with, and then always linking in with the village hall at the end, do you think that's okay?
Yeah, no, it's a great idea.
Yeah. So that's underway, and Anne's put a lot of effort into it. So I mean that's great. I think we just waited to hear the number, because once I have the number, I can go back to the community bucks, etc., and start to see if we can get that funded.
Yeah, and obviously, they like park funding. And we've got funds in the village fund, so if we get an idea of cost, we should be able to cope with it. But that'd be great.
So I should have a bigger update, if not before, but certainly at the next meeting. I'm sure Anne will probably come up and share that with us.
Great.
No pressure. Okay.
So the next action point was just adding neighbourhood plan to this month's agenda, which has been done. And then one of that was about the rerouting of the public footpaths, and it was Nick to meet with Anthony Evans to look at Long Meadow.
Well, we did look at it, and we have talked with the landowner who's been incredibly supportive. In fact, you see what he's done himself now on the far right-hand bank. So if you're coming from Chearsley, Dark Lane, sorry, and you turn left towards Anne Pearson's old house, there's a public footpath on the right with a ditch that was completely silted up. He's completely drained it and dug it out and rediscovered the original pipeline.
Yeah, well, there's a grating there, isn't it? I think you see it quite well. But talking to Graham today, does the cutting, he said that you need to clear it out a couple of times a year, otherwise it will just, and I don't think he knew that, so.
He's supposed to growing.
Yeah.
But also, I think Anthony asked him if he would cut a path through his meadow that would represent the old path, which is the diagonal from Lower Green Lane over to the Edmonds sort of gate, which he did. Although I know that we've had a letter, I think, from Paulie asking about nettles, but I went down there yesterday, you've taken some photographs of them, we can't see any nettles.
I'm not sure whether it's nettled though.
I don't know about the nettles, but certainly if you go down in half light, you get a good risk of being scratched and scalded by the brambles and everything else that's overgrown now on that side.
What, down the side?
Yes.
Okay, down the side, down the side of the park.
Yeah.
We can have another look, we took some photographs and...
No, I was looking for nettles, sorry.
Yeah. All right, let me have another look, Robert. But let me say the owner, can't remember the name,
David and Suzanne.
Are really, really supportive. And yes, they will probably go to whoever to see whether that path can be, the diagonal maybe could be moved. Because what they're suggesting is, maybe a separate conversation on this, but what I hadn't realised, I was looking at the maps and everything in the documents. If you come down Lower Green Lane and you go through the gate towards the bottom left-hand stile, the first stile on the left is public footpath. Beyond that, to the left-hand gate, is his private land. I think you confirmed. And what he's saying is he would be happy to bring that into as a public footpath. So you could go all the way down from the Lower Green Lane if you didn't want to use that gate style, and you access the other one as well as turning right and going back towards the church. So, and then you can come back up to Anne Pearson's if you like, without going through the Edmonds Alley, so to speak. So I think somewhere in there may be an opportunity to try and find a way forward.
They used to go through their garden.
I don't know.
Footpath, that's why the diagonal's there.
Yeah.
They used to go through their garden and they somehow shut it off.
Yeah.
We got it moved.
Well, he's committed to keeping it open and maintained until such time as this may happen. I think Anthony was. Sorry, if you anything to add, I'm sorry.
No, I thought he was very receptive to. I don't think he knew what was going on.
I don't think he realised what he let himself.
Well, that's right. That's quite yeah. And we also talked about the style, about replacing that as well with a gate.
Oh, sorry, yes. One, as you go through Lower Green Lane gates, the first style on the left, looking to replace that with gates, with a bridge, so it makes the reinstate the bridge. And then it just makes it then much more accessible for people who may just want to use that route. And then once through there, you can take a diagonal across apparently the field to join the footpath towards Cullington. So I think good progress, and we just need to keep communicating with these folks. Is that fair to summary?
Next action point was about not feeding the red kites, and Keith was to put a note on the blog, and John Lewis to put out a note on the PC mailing list.
I think we did.
Yes, it's such a long time ago.
Such a long time ago, I'm pretty sure we did.
Yeah. And then the next one is Ramblers Association can run 2 gates behind Chearsley Hill House to make them more accessible. The one by the stables also needs doing action on, and need to speak to Sam Sampson.
Yeah, I spoke to him, he was happy with that. We were just waiting for the Ramblers to come back.
And you're putting in, what sort of gate on that one?
They're all kissing gates, right?
Yeah, they're all kissing gates. I get this terribly.
We're just making the kissing bit bigger, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So you get around it.
Yeah. Oh, this is great. So that's another one. And as you say, we're moving on Simon Vickers Fields with those.
Yeah, we've got all the permissions, and they said they'll come and do it. It's just actually getting in there.
Brilliant. Thanks.
And that's it.
That's it. Items. Well, it's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So remember you said that in a year or two, can we get half of these off?
Yes, I think we should have got bigger than
Okay, planning, sorry, Paul.
Yeah, okay. There's 2 to comment on. The first one is Meadows End, Lower Green Lane. That was a single-storey rear extension, front fill extension. We reviewed the application, we carried out a site visit, and submitted a no objections response on the 30th of August. If anyone wants to see the detailed response, it's available obviously on the planning website. But the sort of summary items, no loss of privacy to neighbours, the buildings, the works are proposed. I would like the carbon neutral initiative with photovoltaic cells and Kessel's heat pump going in. And we've also asked for a commitment that there will be no small, only use small vehicles during the works being carried out to protect the solar lanes, because it's obviously quite a vulnerable position at the bottom end of the village. So that's Meadows End. Vine Cottage, similar exercise. We reviewed the application, we carried out a site visit and submitted a no objections response on the 13th of September. And again, the property is down in the Sunken Lanes, as we asked again, the applicant limits the size of vehicles to protect the lanes when any works are being carried out. Third one, we get to make an appointment to go and see, but responses are due by the 8th of October.
Is that for us? Or?
That's minimal. Sorry?
Is that for us or the actual comments?
What, the 8th of October?
Yeah, I thought that might be me.
Oh, so yeah, no, don't expect to hear from you until the 10th of October. But I've sent a general note out to try and get some sort of feel on when we can have these meetings, because I mean, overall, there's generally only 2 of these or so a month, and they're about half an hour, so hopefully people can fit in. I think I would like to think that planning is one of the priorities that we need to be looking at. It's it's the heritage of the village, and hopefully we can have a good turnout for these meetings. So
I know the last commented with my dates, Andrew, Keith,
yeah,
John Lewis and the Greek Islands.
I know, yeah.
So I think we're all in line.
John Lewis said I'm in the Greek islands, which is very, we're all really pleased about it. No, hopefully, either this weekend or coming into the week after, as well, just try and fit in when people find it easiest, basically.
Sure.
Thank you.
So just the old bakeries be resubmitted with 14th of October as comment date.
Yeah, and if you remember at the last meeting, I mentioned the fact that we hadn't submitted a response because when I spoke to Derek, I said, what you told me doesn't tie with what's on the plans. And we then looked at the plans and realised that his architect hadn't done what he thought he'd done, so it has been resubmitted. If everyone's happy on this one, I've basically already seen that. I'm quite happy to submit or send a note round for comments, but the comments will tie in with almost the same view as we had before, but covering the Richard Wall and everything as well. So I think we're happy with the.
Everyone agree that we should sign this off?
I'm happy.
I will send it through to everybody for approval first, but yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Correspondence?
So there's the one that we mentioned earlier from
Falling Parks.
from the rights of way around Long Meadow and down Farm Path. Please be cut, the nettles are huge.
But farm path's been cut recently.
Yeah, it was just a comment about the nettles being used, so, but let's have another quick look and make sure we're on.
If you go through the gates on the right-hand side, as you're going down from our house down the side of Long Meadow,
Yeah,
the gate all behind it is full of nettles.
right. Well, let's have a look at them. I also get people coming to me and saying, don't cut the nettles down because the butterflies have gone orange and so on. I don't know. But we'll have a look.
The Farm Path's been cut and we'll have a look at the other one.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the second one came in just after the July meeting from Fenella. So I'll read it out. You may recall the parish council were going to look into the eyesores in our village. One of these eyesores are the telegraph poles around the village. And maybe can the parish council make inquiries for them to go underground,
Yeah.
particularly bottom of School Lane, round Dark Lane and Watts Green, and the Green, which is a conservation area. This is mentioned in our village plan and conservation document. Parish council agreed to look into it, but nothing more has been done. Suggested Mr. Green, who lives on the corner of School Lane and St. Bernard's Close, may be able to advise. He managed to get a pole moved out of his garden on the corner. The village plan took an intense amount of work. It was hoped the parish council would act on suggestions. I would be very grateful if you would.
Well, I mean, there's a simple answer to this at the moment. The cost is just enormous. We certainly are not in a position to support that. If individuals like Brian, and I wasn't aware that actually happened in the end, I thought there was still overhead cables, but we can't do it. I mean, I think the last time we looked at this some years ago, and it was to do with the village plan, it had some visionary things set out in it. But we can't afford it, and we're not going to get it for nothing. So unless somebody comes up with a fund or a local billionaire wants to chuck in some money to do underground cables across this village, would cost the same amount of day.
Do you know what order of cost? I mean,
I can probably
news to me.
dig it out.
I mean, I would imagine it'd be fairly
You're
expensive.
talking hundreds of thousands.
Okay, so that order, okay.
Our electricity comes by wire, it doesn't come underground to our house. So, quite
Wow,
something.
so it's major work.
Yeah.
So it's-
That's huge works and disruption to lanes and roads. So it's great to say, I think it would be wonderful. Heritage Village, not a telegraph pole in sight, everything underground. Wonderful, but simply we cannot afford it. And so whilst I'll try and dig out some figures from the last time, and that was a comment I talked to John in the Greek Islands about something else, and it's.
Also, there's two, if it's a couple of 100,000, which we can't afford to get a grant, that kind of decision would have to be, you'd have to solicit the whole village, because it'd be a huge disruption.
To be fair, it's not, it is not that level.
Okay.
It is very expensive, but it's certainly, it's probably into the tens of thousands, it's certainly not 100,000.
Well, it'd be good to
I did have conversations
I'll
with
do the
the
numbers.
That would be good to know, but anyway,
They're not easy people to deal with, even in terms
I'm
of
sure.
trying to get them to come and look at the site, because I've had correspondence and survey, which I don't think ever got carried out. But trying to get hold of some of the BT to sort it is not the easiest of moves.
Well, even now, fibre optic, I see I popped in a story in Perkins this evening on the way back, and he's just been connected to fibre optic,
Is he?
and it's all gone over the wire with his electric and telephone into the house. It arrived today.
Let's find out.
He's tapped into the works that have been done in Cunnington and Winchester.
Is it Ronnie's?
Yeah, because I was going to mention it to you to say, do we need to look at that as well?
I've already written to Ronnie's.
Yeah, you have.
And they said they weren't doing anything, but they're obviously getting a bit closer.
Yeah, they are. It's
Okay,
easy to say
I'll-
the top end of the village, we're pretty much
Just
the same.
like last year,
Yeah, gigabit.
to Westcott, then it is, from Cunnington down the hill, turn right at Winchester, turn,
Yes.
then go up the hill.
So they're putting in.
It's going to Westcott Business Park, but it's exactly the same as when they brought the mains gas.
Yeah,
They go
okay,
up
sorry,
there and
we've
then
had
turn the
Christmas
corner.
questions, so we just need to wrap that. Thank you. So, do you want to just footnote that then, Keith, in your head, and
Yeah, I'll make a note, Ronnie's, good old
on the
Ronnie's.
gas mile across as well? Any other correspondence?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Finance, we've had a report from,
It was a brief report because not very much has happened, but there are a couple of postscripts that I'd like to just bring to everyone's notice. Firstly, there was a question about the payment to the chair, which relates specifically to the costs that he incurred, and he was briefing the new officers.
yeah, is this John Lewis,
Just like-
we were interviewing and briefing
Yes,
officers?
the new
Yeah,
officers.
yeah.
So,
I know they've got a
Helen, if you put that in the minutes, just for the record.
So that's the payment of £49.20.
Yeah.
So it was a briefing of new PC officers.
And I'm just on that, thanks for that, Robert. I thought I'd leave the response to you. What has sprung to mind with me is, so there's absolute transparency, no need for those, questions, I think it's probably time we looked at an expenses policy for the parish council. And it's a one-pager. I've done some research on a dozen bloody parish councils who say this is what we think is reasonable, this is what we allow the chair, this is what we allow councillors. So if you're seeing somebody in there from, I don't know, your MP or something, it's quite in line with the instructions and councils explained. I sort of researched it quite a bit, and this thing happens that from time to time there's ad hoc expenses, and as long as they're declared and not controversial, it's quite possible. So we might need to think about just putting a simple one-pager.
Well, I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, we do have a financial procedures policy that requires two people to authorise any payment.
Yeah, that's true.
So your expenses were reviewed by two other of the
Yeah, okay.
required signatories. So
I was just
I would
thinking
say
about
that
that.
covers it, to be honest.
I was just
Actually, yes.
Unless you want to query, well,
all right,
which I know
I'm
you
sure on
don't.
that. I don't want to put more paperwork in that's necessary.
I just put that forward for transparency purposes, not even doing, I think it's
Yeah,
just
but
until there's a revised policy.
the fault there wasn't in the process, it was in the reporting.
Yes,
Fine. Okay. All right.
The other point I'd like to pick up on though is that this last week we've had quite a spiel from and perhaps Helen would rather you didn't admit this, from the auditors about the money we're holding on behalf of the village trust.
Right.
And literally a page of questions about who owns the village trust, whether the council owns the village trust, whether the council designates its payments, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on, leading to the conclusion that, from their point, they say, we're going to qualify the accounts.
Okay.
Now, I pushed back as hard as I can and said that everything that we've done is totally transparent, has been totally explained, and there is no reason whatsoever for them to qualify the accounts. And I've had no response.
Good.
But just to warn you
Yeah.
that
It's going round. I know that Venetia's told me about Cunnington, Ashenden, another parish clerk for Rebecca at Chiltern. They're all getting this coming through, qualifications on the most outrageously simple things.
Well, I think it's outrageous because we submitted our accounts in April.
I think they're running scared because of what's happened the last couple of years with auditors being fined millions of dollars for not paying enough attention to certain bigger companies, and it's sort of rippled its way through some. But I think you're right.
I mean, it's up in the air, but don't be surprised if next month we come out with qualification in the accounts, because I don't think it's justified, because I think everything we've done is appropriate. And I would remind the council, as I've reminded the auditors, that we took advice on this from our internal auditor before we did anything.
Good.
So I've got
Excellent comment.
I think it's right.
Yeah, totally sorted.
It's opposite.
The only other thing I wanted to mention is that next month, with it being the half-year stage, I'll do just a brief summary of all the expenses we've incurred for the first 6 months.
Okay.
I won't compare them against the budget because we spent 3,000 against the budget of 75,000.
Yeah. Right.
So that just draws attention to it. But I will do that summary.
I will try and get the expenses in for microphones that I didn't have time to set up tonight. Because we will have probably somebody complaining about the audio quality again tonight, so I have thought we could.
Okay.
Okay,
And that's my option. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Reports of councillors attending any meetings? I don't know what's appropriate, Angela.
Yeah, so we had a transport freight meeting a week or two ago. John was there. Was it a week or two?
Last week.
Gosh, I don't know. It's just going. Where basically Ray and Hillary from council came, and we just went through the zones that were currently in place and what they were going to be extended to. Just basically, we didn't really come to any conclusions, did we, John? It was just really just a review of the zones, whether they should be increased, where the freight was travelling most frequently, highlighted what hadn't told us before and how they wanted to shut off areas. I think I left just as we ended, so unless anything was really concluded, it was more just a review of the zones, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think the encouragement was that Graham was much more focused on it now. I think everything, they've done a lot of work in Idaho. I think that's still going through a trial. Then, COVID kicked in, and I know, I think, I'm not telling down the ground, had ill health problems, so things slowed up a little bit. But I think we were quite encouraged, weren't we, that he's now identifying, we've got our sort of preliminary monster now, where we would honestly love to have more restrictions, and the processes are going to start, and he's going to make some recommendations on where you measure HGVs in.
Yeah.
You allow them 20 minutes. And if they spend any longer than 20 minutes, then, it's a bona fide journey to the area, rather than, but they have a technique for measuring it, and I think they are going to start that now. And I think the other thing is, I know John is very keen, wasn't he, to get more local PCs involved, because this, sort of the annual plan together, which is signed off by, and there's 3 or 4 like ourselves who have been very involved, but I think John was, in his role as chairman of the community pool freight group, now is very keen to get more, because there are lots of communities who have issues on this subject, but it does require a commitment on that.
I think watch this space. I was at the Bucks Council full meeting last week, and there was a big push around, from Martin Jack particularly, but the Parish Council closeness to Bucks Council is going to get much, much improved, which is brilliant news. There's quite a few initiatives being discussed and worked through at the moment, how they're going to make that happen. And as I said afterwards, it was sort of a quick catch up. We are, along with 2 or 3 other parish councils, seen as forerunners in terms of getting on and doing stuff. And that's why I think it's really important with things like climate change. They are doing lots of work on it, they are listening. We need to get more people involved. I know Keith, I've introduced you to a few people through my Bucks Council email address with people that can make the difference. And they're really interested in helping, which isn't just, not just words, they're putting some actions in place. But I don't think that you'll see the sort of improvement I'd like to see in Bucks Council for about another year, maybe slightly longer, because there is so much to sort out. I can't tell you, across the whole platform of getting things really ship-shape and the right people in place and the planning. They've been struggling and struggling. They're beginning to get more and more people coming in. And John and I met the guy that's mentoring me by helping him for planning. And really talented young man. And so we're getting there, but it's going to take a while. So don't expect miracles overnight.
So certainly with this, there was, I think Graham now indicates there is more momentum. I mean, we haven't got our solution on the table
No,
yet.
there wasn't,
but,
yeah.
but he's going to be
He's good, right?
much more focused. Great, yeah, they're very positive, but I mean, he can't. He's got to implement the backspray strategy basically, isn't he? And, I think he was sounding a lot more upbeat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they were just saying the next meeting of the Freight Strategy Group is planned for the 5th of October.
Yeah, an evening one.
Yeah, that's
By
John.
Zoom. It's just something, yeah, that's good. Okay, great. I don't know whether to just mention my meetings now or wrap it up in another AOB or whatever you call it these days. Information or something. I'll do it later. Some committee decisions for ratification, I don't think there's any that I'm aware of. Officers' reports, Anthony,
Well,
you've covered
all of
your
my stuff, yeah.
pretty much. John?
I was going to say something, but it is on the agenda later on. John was going to be absence just to report a quick update on the stock. I can wait.
Yeah.
I'll wait.
Okay. All right.
Otherwise, nothing.
He sent a note in as well, but she's copied you.
Actually, John, yes. Oh, no, this is on PC Teams.
Yeah, well, I'm leaving to John. I've actually got something on today's Zoom call with highways about Stockport, might be interesting. Tree and village matters. Ian is in Spain, and if he's listening or looking at us, or hello Ian in Pavia. Is he there? Is that us?
There's at least one person on the screen.
I have to do this.
I don't think there is actually, but I haven't been in touch with Ian honestly in the last couple of weeks.
I think trees that are being looked after are now in the next few weeks. Villages are looking reasonably good thing.
Paul, did you not defer the decision about the expenditure until this meeting? The tree work that had to be done? I thought you agreed it, but said you defer it until this meeting.
Oh yeah, you want to ratify.
Oh, sorry, you were just like, yeah.
What else?
I think it was, you got the costing. Do you have the costings by any chance?
No, I don't. It just occurred to me when you said you'd
Mr.
not defer it.
Bethany.
Yeah, sorry. I'm heavy for
We just ratified, I think we all agreed
Yeah.
that the expenditure was in line, but we just wanted to bring it up
Yeah.
and just say, raise your hand if you're in agreement.
No, not looking.
So there's a raising of hands.
I think you're just on the camera.
For a staff meeting.
Yeah.
Oh, if you give me a second.
And Ian was then going to include in that figure the hall beams on the village green.
Yeah.
That would be additional.
Sorry, I haven't got the attached quote, I can't open it on this. So, yeah, the beach and all things on Farming on the Paths, dead elms in Darnley. So in fact, if we can refer to that email,
Yeah.
25th of August with the attachment, that's
You have
what
it.
we're approving.
It's not for me, it's for you.
No, that's very good, yeah.
Me to you. Thank you. Neighbourhood plan, I've just put that in there simply to say, gosh, if I've talked about neighbourhood plans once or twice or 3 times in the last 24 hours. I've done it a dozen. You all have the note that I got in June from Ken True, who went out of his way to give us a steer. I'm doing nothing with this because my view is quite simple. So it's really a question of whether councillors would like to comment on that document of the 10th of June. And I'd just like to get it basically yes or no, or if yes, why, and no, why. I mean, having talked to Ken again recently, he really thinks that as a village that is nominated as a small village, which we are, rather than a medium village in Cullington, because they've got a church, and they've got a school, and they've got a post office, and these sort of things affect the waging. He gave us 3 options. Do nothing. Passive approach may give the impression that the community doesn't have any views on development. Do the minimum. I think the minimum is to produce a small report or maybe a small update to the village plan which John put together with others, setting out the general approach to development and defining a settlement boundary map. If necessary, that could go to informal consultation and give it a bit more authority. Interim plan C would be as B, but also collect the baseline environmental and planning data needed for an open plan. His bottom line view was that as we don't appear to have the land issues that other places have, the opportunities are much less. And we all know that the application for the left-hand side of the Chiltern Road to go towards Chiltern has now been subject to 2 appeals, both of which have been rejected. We've got a nice development, small development, Stony Furlong, which has worked out well. So that would, in his view, not be a piece of land that they're going to very easily come back to ever and get some permission to put houses on there. You could say, well, as you go Chearsley towards Cullington, you've got the bottom fields where Laz has got the bottom field with the caravan and so. But he really thinks that it's unlikely. And the other thing that's worked in favour is, I know we're ordering you some copies of the Hillsbury plan, which I've now almost read in entirety. It's probably one of the best ones. It is a good plan, but there's never a good plan that's not a bad plan. You know, there are elements of it that, you know, but it's better to have that, because what it does, in a nutshell, without other warts and stuff, is it will stop speculative developments by developers just coming in and chucking in a development because there's no plan. The likelihood of them getting permission to put housing in or whatever is greater. But now there's a very much a disciplined line where Bucks Council will be in control of what comes in and what doesn't come in. And so there's another insurance policy almost that will help anybody suddenly come and say, do you know what, I'll build 20 houses on that bottom field on the left as you go out of Chearsley. So I throw it open. I know not all the councillors obviously here tonight, but if you can read that, if you want another copy, ask me, I'll send it to you. It's very simple. But my personal view is that if we do anything, it may be to revisit the village plan to see whether we could update some sections of it in terms of housing, shop, amenities, if you like, in the village without going into reams and reams of detail. But that's my personal view, and sort of supported by Ken. If we do go down the route of updating slightly the village plan, he has said he would come in and give it open notice. And his expertise, I mean, he's one of the main leaders of the King's Cross redevelopment plan in London, and is currently working on the East-West Rail project, so keeping them on their toes. So can I just leave it like that? If you could look at it, give it half an hour's thought, a cup of tea, and maybe come back to me.
I think it's probably, yes, I didn't actually read the plan the same way as you did. I wasn't terribly impressed with the structure plan. It seemed to be too much of a, this is what we can't do, this is what we said last time. Instead of, it could have been half the size, just say what the policy is, instead of having the other half saying what they've changed from before. I find it very difficult. Maybe I was under the influence of drugs in hospital at the time, but I read it and I thought, okay, that doesn't actually, I thought that left the door open quite a lot. So
The doors are much more firmly
I'm
closed
very pleased to hear it, because I
than they
didn't
were before. And actually, members of the Green Party, the Liberal Party, the Labour Party all agreed with
Good.
the Conservative Party.
I'm pleased to hear that.
There's not everything in there that we'd like, but actually, considering what we haven't got, this is a big step forward.
Good.
And it's been going backwards and forwards for several years now. And has actually been also, I nearly said condemned, commended upon by the inspector. So I think we've got to work with a plan that's not perfect.
Oh yeah, no, I appreciate the good work there, but I think it does need something done locally, because I didn't feel as though we're totally protected.
Okay, so action, read the plan,
Yeah.
and decide whether we need something further as our local plans.
So plenty of coffee keeps stuff away.
Great.
Okay.
You also can put it back.
Yes, please. And also the available as we plan. Okay.
Village halls.
Keith.
Okay, a few updates on signs. We went around the village with Colin Walford from TFB, who told us first we could put signs anywhere, and then later said you can't. But then he explained the process to us, which is going through something called NITS. I don't know what that stands for, but NITS. It stands for
NITS.
But anyway, so Antonio is going to go ahead and get a sign for outside the village hall, but I'm following up with the TFC to find out what process you exactly have to get through to get approval. And it's quite reasonable, because there's obviously sort of, as they call it, street furniture and piping and all sorts that they know about. So you need to make sure you're going to dig into something, I guess, and it makes sense. So that's where we are on that. And again, the same applies, I think, for the sign that we're going to upgrade the sign, the existing sign, that little central
Roundabout.
It's not roundabout. But don't go down there yet. That's another one. But anyway, that is also covered. That, we could put it there on it, and actually we can't. So we've got a map that tells us that this is all.
We just need permission.
We just need permission. So I'm following up with that anyway. Just a few other things, just from a village point of view. We had some complaints, two sets of complaints about noise at the party here. Just to say, when the village hall committee, it's unmanned, so we rely on the hirers. We ask the hirers to turn the music off at 11 and be out by 12. And they all faithfully promise they will do so. But sometimes people are a little poor on timekeeping over focus. So I think we had, in this case, our music running on to 12:45 AM. So we had two sets of complaints about that. So what we're going to do, the committee met, we're going to increase the security deposit and to try and potentially penalise people that go over. But also we're going to try that, we're going to trial having somebody who's volunteered from the village come up and very politely just remind them of of the contract that they signed. Yes, right. And there's the health and safety, if I just turn the power off on a time switch. Anyway, we're going to trial that out, which is just paying somebody to come up and actually just ask people to obey the contract that they signed. So we'll see how that goes. What else?
Cameras for damage to gates.
Yeah. So we had a hire, I presume it was a hire that damaged the stone pillars. Must have hit it with appreciable force with something. So it's going to cost probably about £600, £700 to repair. But we are going to go ahead and put just simple Amazon blink cameras around the village hall and just have them sort of turned on outside the shut house, just so we can follow up if there is any vandalism, unintentional or deliberate. So that'll be happening in a couple of weeks. We've covered the play equipment suggestions, and
Chearsley carbon neutral.
yeah, Chearsley carbon neutral working group that we sort of started into. So I did circulate a note to the parish council. I hope everyone's read, because I am asking for support from that. It's a note that Tim Bradley and John Lewis crafted. And Mike is a member of that group as well. And it's just putting a stake in the ground, sending out a message to the village. We want to put it on the blog and on Facebook. But the carbon neutral are asking the parish council support, so we can put that support on the bottom of that message. It's a very general note. It's just a sort of general call to arms about the sort of things we can start thinking about. So it's very generalist. It doesn't solve anything, but it just says we're going to start down the road to try and learn more and spread more knowledge about it. Because there's two sides to this. Some people think it's nonsense. Some people are totally passionate and want to give air travel and everything and not eat meat or whatever. So there's a whole variety of views, as you'd expect. So, but we're trying to steer a middle course, which is not glue ourselves to buses or stop the traffic going across the road on the road to Cunnington, etc. But just take some small steps and just say, this is what's going on. This is what the grants you can get. These are the kind of plans. There's this electric car hire scheme being launched in Tame, for example. So you don't want to buy a car, you just want to start renting electric vehicles for your odd journey, all sorts of great things. So it's about sharing information, basically. So we've got the carbon neutral Facebook site that I want to publicise through this note. We're working with Bucks Community Energy, Kirsty Shanahan, and trying to get some quotes for electric vehicle, a couple of electric vehicle points we can put in here in the car park, for example. If the cost is reasonable, we're not going to pay, so there's £10,000, we might be able to get grants for that, we've got some funds, etc. But just taking steps to see what we can do. And Derek Allen is looking to try and get a measurement of a baseline of what is our profile, what is our carbon footprint in Chearsley. We've already tried a model that doesn't seem to produce accurate results. It's a model. We put them, various high-level numbers in, it gives you some high-level numbers out. So what we're thinking is potentially having a survey, maybe paper, electronic survey. We're talking to a couple of willing volunteers, one of whom has come from the Cambridge Sustainability Leadership Institute. That's through Kirsty. Another fine young gentleman is the grandson of Michael here. Young Theo Dale, who impressed us with his knowledge. He's sort of a sort of data scientist guy, very interesting. And so we're engaged with them to see if we can craft something together. So Derek Allen was driving that, and again, it's a part-time voluntary activity, so it's interlinked with his full-time job. So making steady progress there. And we'd like to sort of take up Mike's original idea about having an educational evening in the village, an event in the village. And Kirsty ran one very successfully in Speed, 2 hours, sort of 4 speakers. I think the thing is you've got to kind of limit your scope to about 4 things. If you try and do 100, you're just going to be scattergun. And so, it's progress. It's very stepwise. We're not sort of solving everything next week, but that's a sort of quick update. And as I said, we can get, if I can ask the parish council support on the note I circulated, I'd like to put that out and sort of say this is supported by the parish council. We could vote on that. Yeah. That's great. Appreciate that. So we'll get that out and we'll sort of see who else wants to join that Facebook group. Now, again, we're not trying to be sort of overzealous. But we're trying to make sure there's a community where we can share information.
You did also have written agreement with John Lewis as well.
Indeed,
Yeah, I don't mind.
SID update.
Okay, we have our second speed indicator device received. I installed it. So we've got Kevin Denton, who's our village first responder, by the way, doing a great job. He's volunteered to look after the one on the approach from Long Crendon, so he's undertaken to change the battery every week and keep it ticking along. I'm doing the one on Aylesbury Road. I should probably move it onto the Winchenden Road as well at some point. It does, they are doing a job and people do slow down.
Definitely do.
But there are still some people who do not slow down, but you can actually see just by watching them go by and seeing the speed come up at 50, 55 exactly what they're doing. So I don't know. So, I note with interest that Long Crendon has got that raised speed bump now on the entrance. Slows the traffic down very efficiently indeed. Anyway, so I'm thinking about that.
I only laugh because it was part of my brief today with the highways engineer, because they were supposed to have sort of, have you seen the sign that's sort of hidden on the left as you approach it, that says speed up? It's really next to someone's wall. And the one that comes the other way, stuck on it. I said to Colin, you've got such a bloody cheek. I said, you talking about signage cluster, because I would have put a couple of farm signs down the road here with everyone turning into the beef family. And this sign's got about 4 bloody signs on it. So you sort of see bend, stop, and all of it hum, but by the time I've gone over it like 40 miles an hour, it's like this, as it is in the left. Anyway.
You're recording.
And also, they're supposed to be lit at night. The signs.
I was going to ask
supposed
about
to be lit.
that. They are not lit.
No, they're not.
They are not lit. It's even harder to see it.
So it's on his list to sort it out.
Anyway, that's it.
It's my Bucks Council bit. Well done, Keith. Brilliant.
So there's no
The HCR, John just left us a quick update. Oh yes, we met, John and I met with a guy who is this planning mentor of mine, James Duncan. Really nice young man, incredibly talented. He looks like he's just come out of his own levels. His background is pharmaceutical. The pharmaceutical industry with some form of mathematics and, da-da-da-da-da. And, but he got so fed up with it, he went to work for Oxford County Council. And he worked on the project that helped part of Oxford get its act together with transport, links and lights and flows of traffic, which he knows is still a mess, but they did quite a lot of good work. Anyway, he came along, really was able to this is what's been discussed in the last year, and was quite insightful of how we might actually do something different in this particular area. And the one thing he said, which just sort of seems straightforward to me, but you don't think about it, is, for God's sake, whatever you do, see if you can work with tarmac, the highway. For God's sake, don't start digging up verges and digging up, because all of a sudden you'll be into all sorts of studies and utility pipes. He said your prices will go through the roof. With the road, you're pretty sure that they know exactly what's there and what's not there. So I think I'll leave it to John when he comes back, because he thinks they can reduce the cost significantly and give us what we want, if not better, by some one-way type flows and looking at that little island just in front of the parish. But I don't want to say much more than that because it's unfair. John then did the maps and altered them and sent them off to James, and he came back and said, yeah, that would work. And actually James would be one of the people then would help with transport for Bucks and one or two other people getting that sort of further down the road. So it was just nice to involve somebody who had a bit of a light bulb moment and was able to take us in a different direction. So next agenda, I think, item. And we protect our horse chestnut tree, which is fabulous. Stockwell project update. John Lewis, and that's on here, but I think probably John.
Yes, very briefly, I know you were going to say something as well, Chairman, but It has been I suppose a tortuous process, but I think we're nearly ready now. There's 4 distinct work streams. One is the fundamental work on the bond itself, and Derek has now got some quotes together, and that's, I think they're still waiting for when they can do it. There is the local vegetation, which in housing has got a couple of quotes. That would be for stripping the gorse bushes and putting some returfing and with rewilding. He's already got some quotes for that. So the bits that we're organising were fine. It's just the bits that other people have. One was completely clearing the drainage system properly in Chearsley, which hasn't been done probably 30, 40 years. And there have been all sorts of bureaucratic delays to that. And then the final element, which I would sort of describe as cherry on the cake, is the additional curbing. If we did it and we do have a policy gradually, we are curbing more and more, which is to prevent damage to that. But I think there's a fighting chance that we'll get the bits that we can do, because they've got to a certain extent dovetail with each other. The works may well start, but I think the group needs to meet together afterwards.
I agree.
Have you got some good news?
Well, I'm not sure if it's good news. One thing I was just going to say, I don't know whether Mike was aware of this, but we will be, Michael, we will be going to the bank behind the stopwork.
Yeah.
Because we need to create, we need to put gabions in there, gabions to give the strength to the bank for the which will then be planted with wildflowers and all the stuff that goes with it. I don't know how closely Michael's been involved out of courtesy or
Not in detail.
so we need to maybe out of
What do
courtesy.
you mean by gabions? Is it steel wooling or something?
Boxes.
Yeah, with
Cages with
Those
stuff.
things.
Sorry.
I see cages with rocks.
Yeah.
Right.
So-
The bank is liable to slip into the pond.
Pardon?
Is the bank slipping into the pond or what?
Well, I can't answer these questions. I do know that it's been looked at by both the council, Bucks Council Transport for Bucks, and this working group. So maybe at some stage, it would be a courtesy to just.
No, I'll mention.
It seems very unsightly in that sort of.
Well, I think they
Well,
would
it would be if you
eventually
didn't repopulate them with wildflowers, and that's the whole idea. They can all be repopulated with grasses and flowers and all sorts of things. So after a season or two, you wouldn't notice any difference, except to say the bank then has strength, stopping it coming and possibly coming closer to the stop line. Anyway,
I think what would be very helpful is for Derek here in particular to share.
It's
their
relatively
thinking.
I thought he had contacted Rose, because I thought you would. I think
At a general level, but it's just we're gradually getting. I mean, nothing's happened yet for the reasons I mentioned, but.
I understand we can do the access.
But I think probably more detailed information sharing. I mean, we're not.
Is gabions the cheapest way of doing it then?
Well, rather than me answer that question, I think if you spoke to Derek
We have
and
we use steel mooring, it doesn't really show at all.
yeah. Well, I think that would be very. I mean, we're not there yet, but I think what I'd like to suggest is that we.
Somewhere with an
Yeah.
extra can push it.
Yeah.
So-
Okay,
Well, that was
all right, anyway, thank you. So we'll get you involved anyway, Michael, so you know. I say, it looks like we may be able to avoid the ecology report, which is holding up the granite sets for some reason, the curbstones. Because what they're saying to me this morning on the phone to the department is, if we allow the spoil to remain in the location, so in other words, we have to get rid of it, then there's no need for it to go to samples and stuff to go to the Bucks Council, or whatever they do with it. Now, I need that in writing, but they're going to get back to me in the next couple of days.
I think that was in relation to the drainage clearance.
Oh, drainage and
Drainage
drainage,
clearance,
yes.
yes, yeah.
But,
Well, that's
so let me find out what that actually entails, John, and I'll send you the note then. But that could speed things up from that point of view. Yeah, okay. Christmas question time. It's back to Christmas question time. I can see you're all chomping at the bit.
There's a good evening for me in Houston.
Was there a good evening? Good evening.
Somewhere in Spain.
Please do having parish council meeting with village ordinance this soon, Mark.
This one, Mark?
Instead of doing it via Zoom.
Well, no, we're delighted to be here, but unfortunately the government had other ideas.
Now we're back here, you know.
We've got it back now.
Yeah.
In case you got it, we weren't allowed to.
Yeah, we just
Actually got to.
We couldn't.
No, I'm not arguing with you, I'm just saying it's
You make sure you're here every
not
time.
so inclusive.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not very easy road meeting, though.
Any other parishioners' questions or thoughts or?
I haven't got anything on our various platforms.
Hang on, you're not into answers for information yet.
No, I was checking Christian's question.
Oh, were you? Ah,
On your behalf,
I
Jack.
apologise.
Trying to help.
I know.
Any other business become items for information?
I know, this was a Venetianism, wasn't it? It's a cheap
So
something.
we've been
It's a bit like this, I can't, the council does something, you know, but apparently in the written book, this is the right terminology, unfortunately.
But written book is
And we try to get us to stop using the monopolies like some of them have. So there you go. Okay, items of information, Angela?
any other business.
No, the only thing I'd say is, did we not see some kind of correspondence? Somebody not put any kind of correspondence in about the house down on the Aylesbury Road next to Conifers and about the height of it? Was that a formal?
Oh, yes, and Keith actually did some research, I did some research, and I got James, keep calling him Duncan, James Duncan, while he was here, did some measurements. It's exactly where it should be, which I'm just disappointed that we didn't, for some reason, escape through the net. We wouldn't get through the net now with Paul, but it was one of those things, I couldn't comment on it, and I don't even remember thinking about it, because my old house was behind it, so I didn't comment anyway, but it's a shame, because what it does is sets a precedent now for anybody to the left of that property with the other three bungalows, if they decide to come in and develop it and go up. Would 3 houses, 4 houses, I don't know.
To be fair, the precedent was already there with the house to the right
Yeah.
anyway, so that was a starting point, so it's only a
But
question.
they haven't breached, and in fact, they went back and applied
They did try to get
with a non-material amendment, which was a bloody cheat, to even make it bigger and wider and more windows, and it was rejected immediately. And Keith, thank you for your research on that.
This is a house on Aylesbury Road.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to minute that, if that's.
It's just
okay.
near, no,
I
just
just
a
want-
couple of parishioners mentioned it
No,
to me, which is fine, and I sort of did have
I
to
think
do
it
that.
needs a minute that we put in
Yeah, I think otherwise it just.
looked into it and it's compliant.
Yeah, cycle shed for the others is compliant.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
That also needs commenting, it was a written comment from Fernando.
Yeah, I know, just came back to me, so.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. It is compliant, so that's the.
So the cycle shed.
Cycle shed is compliant, the parish council did object to it, but on the basis of its size, we were not surprised that the size looks disproportionate to the location.
yeah.
So he's objected, but it was passed anyway.
Okay, Angela, is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, what that was to pick up.
Nothing more from me.
Well done, sir, thank you for setting up tonight.
Have no other business.
Good Lord, this is wonderful, isn't it? I'm just going to quickly, one of the ones I mentioned. I have my monthly Burnwood highways and God knows what conversation today with Colin Wolford and a few other people today. I've asked him to look at putting a sign either side of the cattle ranch saying slow down farm traffic. And the chief began to say we don't want clutter. Farmers clutter, I've been in Long Prem, it looks like Disneyland. But I said I'm not prepared to give in to that. I asked them a couple of years ago and they were mucking around. But I do think the way people come around the corner from Cutting to Long Prem particularly, you know, you come around, you're there, you're on it sort of thing. Okay, there's a bend sign like that, and coming the other way, it's also very dangerous because you come over the bridge and down the dip, it's quite in the winter.
Speeds are very high.
Yeah, speeds are high, it's winter, it's icy. So just to let you know, I've said I want that to happen now. It's amazing when you get into Bucks Council, you get a bit more sort of time. The sign for Chiltern Road that was knocked down has gone onto will go onto street soon to be reinstated, and the bin is going to be repaired by us. I've asked for the latest policy on road mirrors. They started off by saying they're not allowed by Bucks, and then they retracted that and said, well, they're not allowed. And I said, well, can I see the policy? So I have received the policy. It is here for me to read. This is the draft policy for mirrors in the mail. Because I personally, there's a personal thing, I think elsewhere, a lot of people, including me, have said as you come past the shop on your left and go to turn left for Long Crendon, right's not so bad, but left you cannot, unless she's craning out and pulling out. Adam Laz has given permission for a mirror to be placed on his house opposite, and it just might aid road safety. So looking at that, if you want to...
So mirror to 8 coming out from Village Green.
Yeah, on the side road, yeah. Church and Lower Green Lanes, I've been at them again about the drainage, and they've still not sorted out that top end of Lower Green Lane. We need to sort it out. What I've done with them now is, because this is a monthly 5-weekly meeting, Zoe Ford, who's in charge of admin, I've agreed with her, she will now produce, for tomorrow morning, I'll get an action list of what we've agreed. So it's for the whole of Birmingham, by the way, so it's not just Chearsley, it was a bit centric today. And I said I want a name against it and a date, it's the one we expect some action on. So reluctantly, Colin sort of withdrew to his seat, and see what other people did. But at least we can go back and say, well, hang on, what happened to those? You were responsible for those. What were you doing about it? And then
I think they were, to be fair, they were on his list, weren't they?
What?
They were on his list. I mean,
well, that's it. But having it now documented by the council, there's no escape from it. Because they're not just going to Steve Broadbent, the cabinet member for transport, and say, we're not getting service from you, Street, please, can you help me out?
I think look at Fix My Street then.
Yeah, Fix My Street is another one.
They're on there, aren't they?
oh yeah, well, you put it out with John.
I've not actually been on Fix My Street, so maybe actually you could help me take me through it the next couple
I
of
just
months.
wondered that picking up information, surely they should be picking up.
Well, absolutely. That's why I say the more I can get in front of me when we've got them on the call or in front of us in an office, I can nail them so we've done nothing about it.
The Church Lane drain would be
Yeah.
on Fix My Street.
Same with Church.
6 or 9 months.
So it's there. That's why I said to you about this year. You know, I'm hoping that one will get done quicker. But Stockwell Spoil mentioned Val planning. Oh, East West Rail. It's really interesting because I'm now getting involved in East West Rail through planning and through Ken True, who's doing a lot of research on it for villages. So he's going to be really helpful. It's interesting. I said you know, didn't I? Because he came back to me and he said, "Oh no, John Lewis got to know." Ken said, "What's it? Quainton's getting a station." And I said, "What? Really?" Well, they've actually got a station, you know, now, road station. But he thinks they may be going to try and develop it as part of the line, which means if they do that, lots of houses appear. So I went on and spoke to East West Rail, so did Ken separately. And they said, "Oh, we can give you more information, but you have to enact the Freedom of Information Act." And we go, "That's interesting, you know, what's going on there?" So we're on the case with it, just to establish what is there going to be a King's Cross at Crockington to see, because obviously that will impact us to a degree. I also met, that's the last point I think, two really great guys who've become the field marshals for HS2. There was one appointed about a month ago, and there's one been appointed about a week ago. And they're really good guys. I mean, I haven't brought their names with me, but I'll circulate these, and I've also got their email addresses. And what I've agreed with them is if we hear of anything or we want to feed back to you anything about HS2 and lorries and denial transport, will you look at it for us? And they said, sure, we will. But they're getting good reviews, and people, particularly over at Brendan or Wales, and that side of it, see that's nearer. And their job as a field marshal is to absolutely enforce transport to use the right routes at the right time for the right reasons. So again, Bucks Council, fair play, have put this in place, they're paying for the whole thing, and they're like policemen for the counties and make sure that we're not having the mickey taken.
So they're employed by Bucks?
Yeah. Okay. I suspect HS2 are contributing to that, but they're under the offices of Steve Broadbent and Highways.
Because I know that point was made quite early, a couple of years ago, that
Yeah,
Bucks were relatively powerless to.
yeah. And they've got some real teams.
They were going to rely heavily, if we saw any breaches occurring with HS2 lorries coming through here, for instance.
Yeah.
They weren't going to.
Well, I'll circulate both their names and the email address. It's a generic email address for HS2 da. But if you use their names on it, these stuff will get through to them and they will come back to us. But again, that's been actioned in they'll be on my call every 4 or 5 weeks, not my call, Burnwood's call every 4 or 5 weeks. So we can again take these people to task and we feel that they're not sort of helping us out. And I think, apart from Long Brendan and the Hump, I think that's it from me. Oh, just one other thing. I'm talking with us with our housing trust about properties they have in Chearsley, because I want to understand how many there are they occupied, and what state are they in. I was surprised that there are 14 houses in Chearsley. 14. Yeah, so I'm just waiting. One of the reasons I inquired was because I know that the ones around by Ingrid, that little footpath that goes around the side, that used to be tarmac, then they stoned it. But the tarmac bit in front of the cottages, there's a couple that I think they're now sold, but there's a couple, 2 or 3 there that actually still held to be Fellow Housing Trust. And we've got to do something about the footpath because it's really the tarmac. How did I describe it?
Oh, I know.
Church Lane.
If you follow around Martin and Julie,
They're risen up,
yeah, that's right.
Are the new ones, the new full ones up here?
Where Mrs. Baker lived. Next to Ingrid.
But I said to them, well, are you in a position, there's one empty at the moment, which they're hoping to fill, which is the one next behind where Nick and Tier used to live.
Is it the one where
They had the problem.
there was a
The
parking?
one next to Ingrid is the one with the parking, surely, isn't it?
No, the one we had the BMW on the corner, they're the ones that are moving.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they've had enough, they've been relocated, so that should go away. But they've been told, well, if you do it again, tell them there's no parking.
Tell them there's no parking, yeah.
So, but I'm just trying to get a handle on it, because the others are all rented and everything else.
So those are the new ones, obviously.
And the new ones, obviously, are all okay, but I just thought it would be interesting from the housing point of view. If some of those became available, would they sell them? Would they upgrade them? Would they be new accommodation? Can we do what we did with the ones when we negotiated with the new ones up here? Because the ones to the right of those are also, at least one of them is Aylesbury Vale Housing Trust, where the Morris Minor is. Those sets there. So if they became available, would they do a similar scheme of maybe one freehold and then a couple of rental properties and a couple of...
If we wanted that.
Well, no, I'm not saying that's what should happen. I'm just saying, if they come available, we should be notified. We should be involved and have a handle on what happens there, so we can create something for the future. So that was just an update on that as well. They've been very cooperative. That's it from me. So really, next meeting, Monday the 18th of October at 7:30 p.m. in Chearsley Village Hall. Michael?
Was that Paul?
Oh, you just...
No, I said I have no other business.
That's right, I did. Excuse me. Thank you. Oh, I see the information. And we wish you a speedy recovery.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you indeed. And that's it, and thank you to all of you for coming along this evening.
Cheerio, Ian.
Yeah, cheers, Ian. Yeah.
Buenas tardes, señor.
My coffee is gone.